Hi everybody, how y'all doing? Okay, so I've been getting a couple of questions about differences between fibromyalgia, Epstein-Barr, and chronic fatigue syndrome. They are all similar somewhat as far as they're, quite high pain threshold diseases that, you don't have energy, okay? If you have Epstein-Barr as a diagnosis, that just means that you have that virus. Okay. The difference then between fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue is decided by the difference between the nervous system, muscles, and joints as opposed to the adrenal system. Okay. If you have the fibromyalgia, it's a lot more like an autoimmune disorder, and it's usually treated by rheumatologists. Okay. It is not, however, a disease of inflammation. Okay. So that's a bit of a problem because sometimes people think that it should be treated like arthritis because they're going to a rheumatologist. That's not what they're going to do for you because it doesn't react to that. Chronic fatigue is more an adrenal situation that goes into the nervous system, and it can happen from a couple of different ways suspected. Either a traumatic event, even possibly you might be first diagnosed with PTSD, and a maintained form of either depression or anxiety accompanied by even worse when it gets with, like you've had an accident, like a car accident or a fall off of, an animal like a horse or something. And it seems that it's the inability of the nervous system to maintain and manage itself, and that it's kind of sort of like blowing a fuse. And that there are varying degrees of opinion as to whether the fuse ever gets, put back together, as to whether it's curable. Western medicine does not consider it to be curable. Orthomolecular, which is, the vitamins and minerals and amino acids, that's therapy used in Canada for mental illness, that it's absolutely, curable in that field of medicine. Okay, so there's a couple of other differences, and here are some of the similarities. When there is that prolonged and sustained inability to have energy, okay, one of the ways that that's noted is after exercise fatigue, okay, that exercise does not improve this situation of energy. So much so to the point that the person feels not just your normal, oh wow, after a workout, like you're a little bit tired. No, the person is laid out for at least 24 hours, sometimes up to 3 days, and that they aren't able to, do their exercise again. In fact, even the most simple exercise, sometimes just standing or walking, are incredibly difficult. Okay. Then there's symptoms, and this one goes more along with fibromyalgia because that's your, immune system. One that's messing with that, the glands will be swollen. Well, CFS usually is more the headaches and the migraines, whereas fibromyalgia is sometimes more the dizziness and the stomach aches that kind of feel like the flu coming on. But that's not to say that that general malaise that goes along with the flu doesn't happen to CFS, because they do. Um, but just in terms of how they differentially diagnose, those are some of the ways. There's no blood test for fibromyalgia or CFS. There's no MRI, nothing like that. It will show it. And so, EB is the only one right there with, the virus present in the blood. These all have a way of flaring and receding or remission, and a lot of times people will think that they are cured or have cured themselves of any of these conditions, because their symptoms have receded to a point where they no longer feel them or recognize them as being such, and they may or may not be so, and then a relapse might occur at any other time, 10, 15 years down the road, this type of thing. There are a lot of bills of goods to be sold to people who are in massive pain that have lost, a lot of the autonomy of their life. Um, One of the problems with fibromyalgia and CFS is what's called brain fog. And, just forgetting things all the time, not able to keep ideas straight. Sometimes even a stutter will occur in a person who hasn't had a stammer or a stutter before. There are an accompanying issue of insomnia with incredibly tired, non-refreshing sleep. Okay. There are a host of different supposed diseases that usually it will go through a series of before the person will be diagnosed. Okay. More often, usually the first one they'll be diagnosed with is anxiety or depression. Uh, that or ADD, and sometimes ADD is first before any of the other two. Then it's common that the person will be put to a sleep study because of insomnia, and it may or may not be discovered that they have a sleep disorder. People with CFS and fibromyalgia usually have a stage 4 uh, sleeping problem. There's something wrong, and it's connected with their serotonin levels. And that's why when they're telling their symptoms of, exhaustion, elevation, stuff, that when they're given antidepressants, sometimes it might sort of help at the beginning. The metabolism of the person who has any of these is very different and sensitive to any kind of an input, to the point that they're more sensitive to any kind of medication given, and usually will need less to achieve the same effect in an average person, or it's the complete reverse. It's like they need a horse tranquilizer to do what would, suit an average person, their size, age, and weight. Um, Sometimes these also accompany or are exacerbated by allergies. Magnesium is usually found quite low because that's always depleted in stressful situations. Magnesium must always be taken in a 2-to-1 and will not be absorbed without boron, so you have to take them all together. There definitely are amino acids that will address each one. You need to have them completely um, taught to you, or told to you to be taken by a practitioner like a naturopath. Okay, uh, unless you have a book like the one from Julia Ross, she'll give you guidelines, but even after reading her book, unless you have someone else to kind of watch you go through a process of any of these, I would not recommend anybody try doing it on their own. There are people who say that particular diets have cured them of these conditions, and I generally tend to reserve my excitement while I'm grateful that that person's no longer debilitated by that issue. I believe because it's a bit of a wastebasket term, and because it's not since you don't really have any kind of a blood test, people with chronic pain that are inflammatory diseases, if they do an anti-inflammatory diet, they're gonna have some of that. If you're a person who is gluten sensitive, for instance, and you go on a raw diet, you're gonna think that your raw diet cured your, issue. It didn't. All you did was stop eating the food that was irritating you. Doesn't mean that you had that disease. So because there's no way to really clinically even document, all they have is a way to, watch the symptoms, and those will be tracked. And there's a far longer list, and you can go onto the CDC website and Centers for Disease Control, and you can get a lot more ideas. Um, there are definitely tools to manage, the pain, and physical therapists work with fibromyalgia to do kinds of exercises that help with the joints, because that's usually where their pain is, in the muscles. Whereas with CFS, it has to be a lot more carefully monitored, because you can tip the balance too easily and take them way faster into exhaustion. It's adrenal overload. And I don't remember if I mentioned, the adrenals are also with the kidneys, especially from Chinese medicine. Any of the dark, what do you call, like blackberries, dark fruits, dark vegetables, like black sesame or raisins. There are a lot of foods that you can eat that support, um, and over time can help subside or make manageable a lot of the symptoms of these. Definitely for sleep, people need to have a sleep study, and there's no substitute for that. Because if you do have sleep apnea or insomnia or anything like that, you don't want to be taking any sleep medication, even an herbal one, because it can have some pretty damaging qualities, especially to the heart. And I'm also going to mention the heart because of potassium. Potassium tends to be very low in people who have this condition. If you eat 1 to 2 bananas a day, you can take care of that. If you drink quite a bit of good orange juice, you can take care of that. There are lots of ways to do it. You don't have to be grabbing for pills all the time, but there are certain ones that if you don't have a high enough concentration but balanced with the other ones, if you try to monkey around with it, you're not going to have a good response that's long lasting. Rule of thumb for natural healing generally tends to be 1 month for each year of experienced time of the issue. So when people look at any kind of a natural therapy that they're going to undertake, if they think that they're going to feel better in a month and a half, they're going to be quite disappointed, because they're going to be still feeling, their malaise and this kind of thing. Uh, you know, to have a good support system for yourself, where you understand what your body really can do and wants to do, combining that with what you used to be able to do, it's a juggling act. And a lot of times people do not have an appreciation or understanding for it as a true disease, and they just think people are lazy, or they just think they'll offer very unpleasant advice. This happens a lot with multi-level marketing companies, so kind of watch out for those, because they're looking for you, and they don't really have usually the statistics and the scientific workups to back what they say. People just generally feel better, and that will help, but it's a very different condition when it's one of these. And for someone who's had something going on for 10 and 15 years, or it's been building over time, um, you know, they're wanting something that's going to help them feel better. Adding meditation, making sure that you try to keep with your circadian rhythms, because like I said, the insomnia is usually something that kicks in. Keeping a very specific daily routine as far as your sleep hygiene goes is important, and balances the body. So that's going to be my first set on this. I'm probably going to do quite a bit many more, because people are asking me, because I'm going through this too. So hope to catch you up on everything that I can in general, and even specifics if you want to know what's going on with me. I wish you all best of health.